Hello everybody, my name is Tom Brocious, and this is the third video for the At Home on the Road site video blog. And it has been quite a journey to get here, guys. I already have another video I was going to release last week. I'm really excited about it. I was really pumped. I put it all together, and then my wife convinced me to table it because of the racial tension that came about because of George Floyd. And I was just going to sit this whole thing out, interact with other people's posts and read other people's posts and try to learn as much as I can, because I'm not an expert on race, and you guys would be wasting your time to hear me talk to you about my thoughts on race theory, because I haven't developed them to the point where I really have anything original to say. And the only reason I have anything to say now is because I've been watching my fellow white people, fellow white evangelicals interacting on Facebook, and I think that we have room to dialogue on how we are going about conversing with other people as they process through the grief that comes about from the racial tension that comes from those killings. This is going to be very affirming of evangelicals, because I think that we have to be in a safe place in order to process through this stuff. So if you are not an evangelical and you feel like I'm simplifying your attack or your arguments against it, please understand that the main point is to deal with how we deal with race, and to keep white evangelicals, allowing them to be comfortable, because if you're not in a place of comfort, you're not going to be able to really process through this stuff. And this is a place for all of us to go into truth. I don't care who you are welcome, including white Christian evangelicals, who I am going to begin affirming in their political situation, which is quite challenging right now, because it is challenging for white evangelicals to be able, especially the Republican kind, to be able to process through the race situation because of what happened to us during the Trump election and the Trump campaign. Even those of the Christians who didn't vote for him, all those of us who didn't vote for him, are still feeling a lot of that tension. We were called deplorables, people who support rape, support sexism, racism, homophobia, xenophobia, anti-immigration. We were called Nazis, and that really got pushed through again after the election with the nomination of Judge Kavanaugh, with Christina Blasey Ford's accusation against him about the sexual assault that he allegedly did with her several decades ago. We were called supporters of rape, anti-women. We just didn't care about whether people really treated women appropriately. And then that came about again as we started dealing with the cages, down at the border, when it was talked about how Trump is separating children to those cages from their parents, and this despicable thing that's happening down there. We were called supporters of a concentration camp and called Nazis. And a lot of you guys have pushed back with me over this over the past couple years as we dialogued, and especially with Biden now. You're saying, Biden supported a lot of racist legislation. Biden himself has now been accused of sexual assault, and a lot of these people who have attacked us, they're going to do the same thing. They're going to vote for this guy who's done racist stuff, who has possibly assaulted women, and they don't care because they're afraid of the other guy. They're not any different than us, and they call us deplorables. And when it comes to those cages, Barack Obama started that policy. So why does the guy who started have a Nobel Peace Prize while the guy who's merely continuing it get called Hitler? I agree that there is some inconsistency here that we haven't really sorted through in our culture, and we may never fully sort through because of the tribalism that's happening here. It's very tribal, and the tribalism hurts our ability to work together, to have any dialectic that gets to any sort of truth. And that's just an unfortunate scenario that we really have to try to overcome. But as evangelicals who find themselves backed against the corner with people, they really are interpreting, you may be visualizing this race situation through that lens, because I talk to a lot of Republicans who believe that this whole racist scenario coming up, this whole racial tension, is being manufactured by Democrats who are trying to rile up their base while demoralizing Trump supporters, all in hopes of having a more favorable outcome in November when we have the presidential election. And a lot of you guys have said to me that you think that the Black Lives Matter movement is basically really a Marxist front. You know, they've taken the bougies overthrowing the proletariat, that whole old paradigm, and they've switched it to whites being the oppressors of black, and they're going to use that narrative to dismantle our republic and install some form of a leftist authoritarian regime. And you think that this Black Lives Matter is going to be a catalyst for that attempt. And you also have said to me that you think that the Black Lives Matter movement has some clauses in it that say that they actually are also attempting to dismantle the nuclear family as a structure in our society. And to that effect, all that stuff, I'm going to say to you that I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know how much that's true, if it's more complicated than that. I haven't read enough about it. I've read some things on race. I've read some things on Marxism, but most of my reading on Marxism is really about how in its origins it was different than Christianity, and they have different metaphysical worldviews to a large degree. And so as I was dialoguing with one of my good friends from high school who is himself a Marxist a couple weeks ago, maybe a month ago, I realized that I need more than a tune-up before I can really talk about Marxism intelligently, and I will continue to pursue that so that I can do that effectively. So here's what I do know, and here's what I can speak into, because I had the benefit of sitting under some South African theologians for classes. I was doing a Bible institute, the Vineyard Leadership Institute, where I was going to get a Bible certificate rather than going to seminary, and I was doing that before I decided to go ahead and go to seminary. And I sat under these South African theologians who were there as the apartheid regime fell apart in South Africa. And they have such incredible insights. They really have a perspective of what it was like to see that whole thing come down and reconciliation between the whites and the blacks after the whites had just horrifically separated themselves from the blacks and exploited them in that diamond trade. What they had to say, which I think is incredible, they want us to know that they are so full of remorse and sad that Christianity had very little to say during the times of apartheid. They were silent, they were complicit, and sometimes even supportive of one of the most racist regimes in the history of humanity. And they really want us to know that if we don't say anything in the face of racist or unjust scenarios, that we really are shrinking back from our prophetic responsibilities, and that if we neglect our prophetic responsibilities to this world, that people who do not understand us and people who may not agree with us have every right to question whether or not we're just a country club and whether or not we have any reason to exist at all, because our prophetic witness is crucial. And some of you really might think that this is just a manufactured crisis, or that it's so small that it shouldn't be getting the amount of attention that it is getting. Now, here's what I want to say here too. Number one, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And three, our Bible tells us that we are not to give the devil a foothold in any area of our lives. And I think that it falls over into our society. We can't give the devil a foothold. And so if there is a minor racial scenario going on here, we have to address it, or else we give footholds to things that become bigger that a lot of conservative Christians are afraid of. And so I think there is something to this scenario. I think that there is stuff going on. That Breonna Taylor killing was horrible and deserves its own discussion. But the George Floyd one is the one we're going to address, because I think it is particularly unique for 4 reasons. I think the George Floyd video was incontrovertibly deliberate. That was done on purpose. It was collaborative between 4 police officers, 3 of whom were keeping people from disturbing the guy who had his knee on that guy's neck. And 3, it was particularly brutal. It was just gruesome. Oh my God, I can't believe that something like that happened like that. And 4, it was videotaped. And that videotape is about to become very important as I use that to discredit why I think Candace Owen was wrong by saying that this video is being played up into something more than it is. Candace Owen says that this shouldn't be even that big of a deal because George Floyd may not have been a very virtuous person. He had a criminal rap sheet, and when he got pulled, when the whole scenario broke down, the police were able to find some kind of white substance in his pockets. And I think there's some truth to what she's saying, but she's applying it terribly. You know, she says the black community is doing a bad job of celebrating the right members. They're celebrating the lowest common denominators in society. And maybe that's true, but maybe that's true in a way, you know, like maybe we're celebrating too much of Flava Flav and not enough of George Washington Carver. You know, maybe we should be celebrating black intellectuals and black heroes more than has been semi-entertaining reality TV show stars. You know, we don't need to be talking about the Flava Flavs of the world. But here's what that doesn't mean. That doesn't mean that the lack of virtue in George Floyd's life has anything to do with whether or not there was any merit or anything to do with whether or not that's an important killing in our world right now. Because George Floyd, this isn't just about George Floyd. That killing was horrible, and it was videotaped. It was sent all over the world, and black people across our country and across our world watched a police officer brutally murder that man. And they realized that that could be their sons, that could be their husbands, that could be them who found themselves in the wrong scenario, subjected to that kind of murder, and watch some people try to protect that injustice against them. I think that alone is something that has to be discussed. It has to be addressed. And hopefully everybody agrees that that's something that we need to talk about a little bit. And now I think there's 2 barriers and objections that come up to keep white people from speaking into this moment, speaking into moments like these. The number one thing is white guilt. You know, white guilt can work in multiple directions, and it's rarely helpful. I think it's appropriate that we feel some element of guilt, and we recognize that as white people, our country has done a lot of brutal things to people of color, and there's some responsibility on some level, how high that is, that we bear based on the highly charged racial past that we have. And white guilt can be a problem. It can be a problem because some people get defensive about it. Some people really want to address it in ineffective ways, and they want to use these scenarios to deal with their own white guilt. And see, as Christians, that's not how we should do it. We should deal with our guilt. We have to take it to our Savior. You know, everybody who is in Jesus, you know, there is no condemnation for those of us who are in him. We have been washed in the blood. We have no shame. And so as we deal with black people who are grieving Breonna Taylor or who are grieving George Floyd, we cannot do this in a way that makes us feel better about ourselves. We cannot be dealing with our own guilt and simultaneously truly meeting people as they face massive injustice that's leaving them grieving, that's leaving them feeling horrible. We can't meet them and be trying to deal with our own benefit, for our own benefit. Two, I don't think that we all have agreed on the meaning of this event. If you've made it this far in the video, I know that you are earnest. There's no way that you would be listening this far if you aren't pursuing truth to some degree. I believe that if you are a conservative evangelical that's made it to this part of the video, you are happy that slavery is gone. You are happy that white people and black people can get married without fear of getting lynched. You are happy that white people and black people can share the same water fountain. You're happy that black people can vote. And you're happy that Martin Luther King lived the life that he did and brought the message that he brought to this world. But I'm going to ask you to enter into a little bit of prayerful reflection, not any reflection that I wouldn't expect of myself and continue to ask of myself. I want you to ask yourself, have you sought black perspectives on this issue? Are you seeing this through their lenses? Are you hearing their stories as they deal with this? Because I think if you do, and you talk to enough of them, you may not be able to talk to all of them because some of them don't want to talk about it with you, especially if they feel cross-examined. And you may not have a whole lot of them. You may need to watch YouTube videos or read books, But if you get into this, you'll see that a lot of them are still very terrorized by this killing because they know it could be them or their sons or their husbands. A lot of them are grieving a lot of the racialist past that they've dealt with. There's been a lot of pain, communal pain that they are dealing with. And individually, a lot of them have had racist interactions, some of them serious, some of them not so serious, but they need to deal with that. And you'll find that a lot of them think that most white people are totally indifferent to it or willfully ignorant or not willing to see it. And they think, and even worse, they think that there are some white people out there that are secretly super racist at home, using the N-word in their own house, saying a bunch of horrible racist things in their own house, but they're being very silent when they're out in public because they don't want to be sanctioned. They don't want to be attacked. And so they don't know who around them is a super racist, and they don't know who. They think it could be anybody a lot of times. I think that if you enter into this scenario from them, you'll see that we really do need to hear from them. We really do need to talk to them, and we really need to mesh with them if we're going to save our republic. Our republic, which is supposed to be indivisible, but made up of people, a diverse people that need to understand each other. Alexander Venter, who's one of those South African theologians that I really, really revere, says that mutual storytelling is crucial for any way of addressing this kind of racial tension that needs some form of reconciliation. We need to hear each other's stories. Their stories may deconstruct our stories to some degree, but not totally. You will not be forced to hate America or hate your own life by understanding what's going on in black people's lives. It may force you to refine it and have a slightly more complex understanding of it, but it will be more rich and it will prepare the way for us to continue to grow together in our country. And so I'm asking you to do this prayerfully, to gain more perspective prayerfully, to bring that with you into your prayer time to the Lord, where you're not just asking God for things, you're asking to be formed. You're forming yourself, forming your opinions, so that what you have to say on Facebook isn't just off the cuff. It's something that was prayerfully constructed and reflects prayerful consideration for the people that are your neighbors and your colleagues and that you share this nation with. I'm just asking you to pray and be very prayerful in the things that you have to say. And that could be the difference between saying something that is very helpful and very hurtful. And I love you guys. If there's anything that I missed or I need to say differently, let me know. I'm interested in learning too. God bless you all. I'm not even going to bring my daughter up here because this is too serious.